Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to have a look at another collaboration beer, and we are of course going to stick to the motherland of Scotland. So the one that we're going to have a look at today comes from two breweries that have featured on the channel a number of times before. The home brewery, I would say, are potentially the best all-round brewery in Scotland, whereas the away brewery are a little bit of a kind of newcomer to the scene in comparison, but they do some really nice beers. When I got to know them, they were best known for their different kinds of imperial stouts and barley wines and stuff like this, but in more recent times it seems they've been focusing on some sour beers and farmhouse things, which I will need to have a look at some point soon. But when I saw that these guys were doing a collaboration together, I really wanted to get a hold of the beer, and I've heard some very good things about it actually. But it's a style that I've had from both breweries before. It's one that I know both can do very well, so yeah, this should hopefully be pretty awesome. So hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, for the home side of things, we are going to head down to Galashiels in the Scottish Borders region, which of course means that we're going to have a look at another beer from the wonderful Tempest Brewing Company. So this particular beer is called Dream Sequence Sticky Side Up. It comes in at 12.8% ABV. This one is a rye imperial stout aged in bourbon barrels from Heaven Hill in Kentucky over in the US, but it's also brewed in collaboration with the wonderful Dead End Brew Machine, who are a gypsy brewer based mainly in Glasgow. So yeah, this should be awesome. We've had some really nice imperial stouts over the years from Tempest Brewing Company, as we have from Dead End Brew Machine. We've had 2 or 3 of their beers on the channel over the years, but I still stand by this, that Dead End Brew Machine have done one of the best barley wines that I have ever tried actually, and it was just awesome, I have to say. So yeah, when I saw that Tempest, who are potentially my favourite Scottish brewer, were collaborating with Dead End Brew Machine, who are potentially my favourite Scottish newcomer brewery, if we can call them that at this point in time, this is a beer that I really wanted to try. So yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see what it's all about. And I do apologise in this video if the lighting's a little bit bad. When it comes to shiny cans and stuff, it's just a little bit of a pain in the arse to get the lighting right in these videos, but we'll power on. We will power on. I'm sure we're going to get a nice beer out of it. But yeah, let's crack on and see what this beer is going to have in store for us. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about both the breweries involved in this one before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. You can find all the usual links in the video description below. That's the brewery websites, the link to my other reviews that I've done both from Tempest Brewing Company and from Dead End Brew Machine. We will no doubt add more to those lists at some point in the near future, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is highly appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel and use the search bar and search for beer based on the geography tagging system. So as I say, just go in there, use the little search bar, put your hometown, state, county, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Scottish playlist along with a number of other things, and that will be getting added to quite frequently over the next little while. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a little bit once again about Tempest Brewing Company, or Tempest Brewery, or however we're going to refer to them. So yeah, Tempest Brewery was founded back in 2010 by Gavin and Anika Meiklejohn. So Anika trained as a chef in New Zealand, but the couple returned home to Scotland in 2007 to run the Cobbles Bar in Kelso, again down in the Scottish Borders. But Gavin had previously worked for Whistler Brewing Company in British Columbia over in Canada, and so he had an appreciation for craft beer and had actually taken some brewing courses in Sydney in Australia and then homebrewed in his garage in Wellington, New Zealand, using a little 50-litre brew kit. But his experimentations with home brewing and things were what really got him inspired to go and actually found his own brewery. But Gavin is joined by Alan Rice, who acts as the business development manager for Tempest Brewing, and he had previously worked for Stewart Brewery up in Edinburgh and also had some experience of living in New Zealand and Australia and experienced their craft beer scenes. But the brewery was previously housed in old dairy buildings in Kelso, and this brewery, the brew kit that they had there was largely homemade and engineered to produce like really big flavoured beers on a kind of shoestring budget. But their beers proved to be extremely popular, and so they decided to expand, and they moved to their current and bigger home at the Tweedbank Industrial Estate in Galashiels. In June of 2019, they submitted plans to build a new brewery building with a bar and restaurant on the site of the former Eldon Mill, which is very close to Tweedbank train station, but I believe this move has still to be finalised. I'm not sure exactly what stage they're at, but of course things kind of got put on hold because of the COVID-19 pandemic and so on. But as of July 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 165 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. And for me, you know, some of my favourites from these guys would be the Marmalade on Rye, which is a lovely old school West Coast IPA with a little bit of rye malt in it. Beautiful, beautiful beer. The Old Parochial Scotch Ale is a big favourite of mine. And yeah, the Modern Hellas is a really, really nice lager beer as well. But yeah, for me, Tempest Brewing Company are potentially the best all-round brewery in Scotland. They try lots and lots of different things, and yeah, it's one that you really, really should check out if you get the chance. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Tempest Brewing Company for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to check out the latest goings on and things like that. And you can, of course, check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all those different beers available from Tempest Brewing Company. But yeah, let's head a little bit north from Galashiels toward Glasgow, and we'll chat a little bit about Dead End Brew Machine then. So Dead End Brew Machine were founded in Glasgow by Irishman Chris Lewis, who is I don't know what we should say, a very highly regarded home brewer. But he and his friend Jake Griffith, who now owns Upfront Brewing, had together won the Institute of Distilling's home brewing competition back in 2012, and it was this that inspired them both to go commercial and set up their own companies. But Chris had apparently started winemaking back in about 2008, but he said that his wine was pretty awful, but he later learned that it was much quicker to make beer, and so he went to his local home brewing shop, which turned out to be run by Scott Williams of the wonderful Williams Brothers Brewing Company, one of my local breweries here in Clackmannanshire. But he was later convinced to launch his beer commercially by Derek Hoy of the now defunct Hippo Beer Group in Glasgow. But at the moment, these guys are operating as a gypsy, client, cuckoo brewer, whatever you want to call them, and most of their beers were originally brewed either in Fallon Brewery, out by Callander, to the northwest of Stirling, or at the Drygate Brewery in central Glasgow. But recently they've been brewing a number of their beers at 71 Brewing in Dundee, and also a few things have been brewed at Overtone Brewing in Yoker in Glasgow. But over the course of 2021 and 2022, the vast majority of the beers that they've released have been sort of sour, funky, wild ale type things. And I'm still to try those. I've not actually come across any of the bottles of those. But yeah, from what I gather, they are doing some very, very interesting stuff. But when I got to know these guys, they were producing a lot of big imperial stouts and barley wines and kind of random stuff like this. But yeah, in my experience, a very, very solid brewery. And I do hope that Chris kind of scales up and turns Dead End Brew Machine into a kind of a larger volume brewery, because their beers really have been excellent in my experience. But as of July 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 85 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and yeah, hopefully that number will continue to rise as time goes on. But yeah, that's everything, as I say, that I can really tell you about this brewery. But yeah, if you want to learn more about Dead End Brew Machine, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that, and that'll keep you up to date with all the latest goings on. I think they're a little bit more active on Instagram rather than Facebook, to be honest with you. But yeah, that's that for your brewery history section. Let's go on and actually have a little look at the beer itself. So I'll just like to have a little look at the can of this one before we open it up. You can see it looks very, very nice. You can see that little kind of crystal ball or whatever it's meant to be in the middle of this one. I'm not really sure at all what that's meant to be, but there you can see the Tempest Brewing Company symbol there, and if you go around the side you can see the other Tempest Brewing Company symbol, the lightning bolt in the glass and there is a Dead End Brew Machine for you too. 440ml can, of course. You can see this one down here, Dream Sequence Sticky Side Up. There are a few different editions of Dream Sequence, from what I understand, that have been aged in different barrels and stuff like this. But this one is the bourbon barrel aged rye stout, coming in at 12.8% ABV. But it tells you a little bit about this beer on the back. It says, together with the enigmatic Dead End Brew Machine, we've assumed the role of cosmic dream catchers, continuing the dream sequence with a sweetly spiced imperial rye. Sticky Side Up is an intense blend of vanilla and spice aged for 24 months in first fill Heaven Hill bourbon casks. The sticky indulgence of date syrup and subtle notes of anise and fenugreek will catapult your taste buds into another world, a moonlit world of decadence, opulence, and Eastern promise. So this is kind of interesting, because that's one of the really interesting things with Dead End Brew Machine as well, is that they like to add adjuncts into their beer and use unusual barrels and stuff like that, and that's one of the things that really makes them very interesting. So I do hope that Dead End Brew Machine will continue to brew the more malty side of things, as well as the new kind of sour and farmhouse beers. But yeah, it does actually contain date syrup, vanilla, fenugreek, and star aniseed. So yeah, I'm really not familiar with fenugreek at all, so I think I might need to do a wee quick Google of this and just see what it is, because yeah, kind of embarrassing not to know what this is. It's just it says it's a plant similar, the seeds taste similar to maple syrup apparently. That's quite interesting. So very cool. But yeah, I bought this one at Valhalla's Goat in Glasgow. Wonderful beer shop, owned of course by Williams Brothers Brewery. I don't know what I paid for this one. I bought this a couple of months back, and my dad went and picked it up for me from the shop, and we've kept it for the little mini series of 10th anniversary reviews. So definitely cool to feature a collaboration from two of my favourite breweries here in Scotland. But yeah, let's get this guy out into the glass and see what it's all about. So, oh yeah, let's do this. Oh, now that's interesting. Doesn't look like an imperial stout actually. Maybe I've told you lies about the style. Let's have a little look at this one. Maybe it's an imperial red rye ale or something like this actually. Let's just have a wee look at that. Oh, it's a rye wine. I've told you lies. I've told you lies. This one is a rye wine. Ah, that's terrible. Okay. Makes sense now. Absolutely makes sense. Yeah, I thought it was an imperial stout, I have to say. So a rye wine, we can get rid of that now. Turn the screen off. So yeah, the definition of a rye wine is basically, it's the same idea as a barley wine, but 30% of the malt base is, at least 30% of the malt base has to be rye malt. So yeah, that kind of makes sense actually. I don't know where I read that this one was an imperial stout, but I was sure it was. But anyway, doesn't matter. We've got a rye wine. So you can see that when this beer poured, it had about a quarter finger of a frothy, kind of very light fawn, beige coloured head there. But that's faded away to be pretty much nothing on the surface. At 12.8%, you kind of, and when it's barrel aged as well, you would kind of expect that. There is just a little foamy ring around the edge of the glass there. But yeah, it looks really nice, this one. I don't know why they said it was. They just said it's a sweetly spiced imperial rye. I don't know why they didn't say it was. Maybe it isn't a rye wine. Maybe just it's an imperial rye ale or red rye or something like this. Who knows? But anyway, we can talk about styles all day. The main question should be, is it a good beer? And knowing these two breweries, it probably will be. But anyway, if we shine the light through this one, I can see it's got a lovely, it's a very dark sort of mahogany kind of chestnutty colour that's coming out of this one. As I say, if you shine the actual light through it, it has a little bit of that kind of Coca-Cola, Pepsi Max kind of colour to it. But yeah, it's like a very dark chestnut bordering rosewood type colour, this one. One or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones going up toward the surface of the beer there, which you can actually see. But otherwise, there's not too much to report in this one in that sense. But yeah, you can see it's got a little bit of a kind of natural haze to it. Does this beer have a little bit of wheat and things in it? No, it is actually just malted barley and rye. So yeah, looks very, very nice, this one. And compared to the rye wines I've seen, which isn't too many, I think we've only reviewed maybe 2 or 3 of these on the channel over the years. But yeah, it's the colour of this one is quite similar to what we would expect from any barley wine, but especially a rye wine. So yeah, nothing else we really need to say about the appearance of this one. Let's have a wee look at the aroma and see what it has. Oh yeah. I'm going to say straight away, this is really interesting. Now, a first impression of this one is, with it being bourbon barrel aged, it's not actually too heavy on the barrel, which can often be a thing with some beers. But you know, Tempest and Dead End Brew Machine, like I say, they know what they're doing. So yeah, but this one for me is interesting because you get the spice that you would kind of expect from a rye wine. You've got big brown sugars in there, but you've got some unusual fruity notes from the adjuncts and things. Obviously, you've got a little bit of an almost kind of herbally, vegetally type character as well. Some lovely fruit, and then just a wee bit of hoppiness. It's a really interesting smelling beer, this one. Just a bit annoyed at myself for kind of ruining the video a wee bit by not realising that it was kind of a rye wine or an imperial rye. I thought it was like a rye imperial stout, actually. But yeah, just when I saw it pouring, it kind of made sense. But yeah, let's break the aroma of this down a wee bit and just describe it that a little bit more in depth for you. So for me, the backbone of this beer, you can smell a good little bit of that woody character in there. As I've said in many reviews before, American oak for me is a lot smoother in its aroma than European oak. European oak has a little bit more dryness and spice to it, whereas American oak always tends to be very smooth and almost slightly sweet and vanilla-y in a sense. They're different species of tree, so it completely makes sense. But yeah, above this one, you get that lovely smooth American oak in there, the little touch of vanilla, and you can smell that a little bit of American bourbon. And as I've admitted on the channel many a time, I'm not overly familiar with bourbon because, you know, being in Scotland, we just don't get that much bourbon for obvious reasons. But I think I've got a friend in the States who is a big fan of the American bourbons, and I'm sure he'll educate me on them. But yeah, above the kind of woody layer, like I say, you get the Heaven Hill spirit, and you can smell it's quite a, for me, the Heaven Hill, it's a very sweet and like deep brown sugar that you get out of it. I've always found that American bourbon is a lot sweeter and more brown sugary than Scotch whisky. Scotch whisky has a bit more variance to it. It depends on the region, but Scotch whisky is a little bit more kind of spicy and floral and things like that. But yeah, the barrel and aspect of this one is really nice. And when you sugar the beer up a little bit, you get more of the barrel, and when you let it settle, you're getting more of the kind of rye wine itself. But yeah, above the barrel, of course, you start to get this kind of rye bready, bread crusty character coming out of the beer, and then you get a lighter, fluffier rye bread. And interestingly, the rye bread doesn't come across as being too caramelised in the aroma. Apologies for the cut there, guys. Camera was just being a little bit strange. But yeah, we were talking about the bready qualities and the malt base of this beer. So yeah, I mean, for me, like I said, you've got a little bit of that kind of more straight up rye bread crust, the kind of drier rye bread on top of that. Then you start to get a wee bit of a kind of wholemeal brown bready character coming out above this one too. But then above that, you start getting the brown sugars coming out of the beer. And for me, the brown sugars are really interesting in this one because you do get, you know, you get a little bit of that kind of almost like mapley syrup type note out of it that you would apparently expect from the fenugreek. But there's also a little bit of this You do get a little bit of that more kind of leathery brown sugary character out of this one, which is great. So yeah, lovely kind of leathery brown sugary character, but you've also got a little bit of a straight up kind of sweet caramelly note coming out of this one too. The thing that's interesting for me is that this beer does have like aniseed in it, or a star anise as they're calling it, but you don't get too much of that kind of licoricey note in the aroma. There's a little bit further forward on the nose. So yeah, there's a little bit further forward on the nose, and you've also got a little bit more. You do get a little bit of the vanilla coming out of the nose a wee bit later on. Yeah, a little bit of vanilla on the nose, a little bit of the licoricey character, but yeah, the sweetness of the brown sugars is really a part of this one. As I say, you get a bit of the maple syrup, you do get a straight up sweet caramel out of this one, there's a wee bit of the leathery brown sugars in there, and usually in barley wines and so on, like leathery brown sugars is an indicator of it being a slightly longer wort ball, but it's quite hard to tell actually with this particular beer. Yeah, this is pretty interesting, I have to say. Not 100% sure what to make of this actually, but yeah, the aroma is really, really interesting. And you do, the more that you smell this one, and the more that the beer is warming up, of course, the more of the spiciness that you get out of this. This is really a very, very cool beer, I have to say. So thumbs up to Tempest and to Dead End Brew Machine for doing something unusual. But I'm not surprised when it's these two that it smells pretty damn awesome. So yeah, I think that covers the malty and barrel side of things. When it comes to the hoppy side of the beer, and of course barley wines and rye wines and so on are not the most hop forward of styles, this one's also been aged in barrels for 24 months, which means a lot of the hoppy character will have dropped off. But you still get a little bit of green component out of this. I mean, I can still get the remnants of a kind of floral note out of this one, and also some grassiness as well, and there's a wee touch of like earthiness and herbal character in there too. So yeah, aroma wise, this is really, it really is very, very interesting. So like I say, a lovely little bit of kind of floral aromaticity, good little bit of grassiness in there, and yeah, just a little touch of earthiness and herbal character too, but you have to take the nose in like really quite deeply to pull those out of it. But yeah, on the fruity side of things, for me it's really interesting. You absolutely get the dates out of this, and the dates are a little bit, the dates are also giving you a little bit of an impression of like sultana, you know, dry white green grapes, and a little bit of like dried pear or something like that. But there is quite a little bit of red fruity character to this one too. It's not like raisiny sharp. It's got a little bit of an almost kind of, the more that I smell this beer too, the more I get a slightly phenolic type character out of this one, you know, similar to what you get from like a Belgian double or Christmas pudding or something like that. It's got a little bit of that going on, but then, as I say, you've got a little bit like a black curranty and figgy type note coming out of this beer too. Yeah, this is a really, really interesting aroma, this one. As I say, I was expecting like an imperial stout from this beer, not a rye wine, but yeah, very nice surprise, I have to say. It's not often you will come across a rye wine. So I told you lies at the start of the video that I had tried this style from both breweries. I've had barley wines, I think, from both of these guys, but not a rye wine. So yeah, very rare style of beer actually. But yeah, as I always say, take a little bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beers before you get stuck into them. But I think it is about time for us to try this one. So this one is the Dream Sequence Sticky Side Up, a rye wine at 12.8% ABV, aged for 24 months in Heaven Hill bourbon barrels. From this one's brewed at Tempest Brewing Company in Galashiels in the Borders, in collaboration with the wonderful Dead End Brew Machine, who are a gypsy brewery based mainly in Glasgow. Let's get stuck into this. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Ooh, yeah. Now, both of these breweries have very, very high standards. And this is kind of raising the bar even higher, I have to say that. This is pretty ridiculous. This is very, very good. So, just going to say a massive thumbs up to both breweries in this one. Yeah. Aroma-wise, flavour-wise, sorry. Always doing that. This is just absolutely great. This is going to be a nice sipper for the rest of the evening. My dad's already gone to his bed, so he's missing out on this one. Missing out on one of my, I think, yeah, one of the best Scottish beers I've reviewed. That's definitely fair to say. Yeah, this is great. I don't know if it'll top the, was it the Boris the Crusher it was called, that I had from Dead End Brew Machine. That was a beautiful, beautiful barley wine, and I think that was one of my first encounters with Dead End Brewing Machine. I don't think it's quite going to top that one in a sense, and maybe that's just the nostalgia factor, if you like, but it runs it very, very close. I mean, Old Parochial is probably my favourite beer that I've had from Tempest Brewing Company, and it also runs that very close. So that's this beer is up there with the best Scottish beers I've tried. Absolutely wonderful stuff, really wonderful stuff. It gives you everything you would expect and want from a rye wine. You've got the little bit of spice to it. You've got the big brown sugary notes, the chewiness and things. You've got a little bit of hoppy character, lovely fruity notes, and of course, because it's Dead End Brew Machine, you've got that little bit of complexity from the adjuncts, and of course you're getting the barrel expertise from Tempest in there as well. Yeah, this is ridiculously good. I think, I can't remember what I would have paid for this one, to be honest with you. It was probably in the region of like £10 or something. Worth it. Absolutely worth it. So let's try and break this one down and just describe it for you a wee bit more in depth then. So, the backbone of this beer, of course, it's that lovely, smooth American oak. And the beer shows you that this beer is not barrel heavy, which shows you how well it's done when it's 24 months in the barrel. At that point, the barrel can become very dominant in the flavour, but this one doesn't. It's just the bigness and fullness of the beer and the adjuncts and things. But yeah, you've got that backbone of lovely, smooth American wood. As you move toward the front of that middle third of your palate, you get a little bit of a nice kind of dry but smooth and sweet vanilla there. You can taste the Heaven Hill bourbon barrels. You can taste the Heaven Hill, spirit just above that. You feel that layer there, and it comes across. It's interesting. It's a bit different from the aroma in that sense. It's a little bit drier and more leathery than some of the other bourbon barrels that I've come across through doing these beer reviews. And of course, it can vary from beer to beer. We have to remember this is a rye wine, and most of the Heaven Hill barrel-aged beers I've had, I think, have been imperial stouts, but still, you still get an idea of what the spirit is like in a sense. So definitely a bit more of a kind of leathery and dry bourbon for me compared to other things. But of course, above the spirit layer, you start to get the actual elements of the rye wine. So let's have a wee look at this. So for me, above the spirit, you start to get a little bit of that drier rye bready bread crust, but then above that you get the rye bread, and the rye bread in the actual flavour is a little bit more kind of caramelised and things like this. And then above that you have this layer of brown bread, but it's like a brandy soaked, it's kind of like a brandy soaked, yeah, I would say that it's like a brandy soaked fruit loaf type thing. It really is very much like that. Within that, you can taste a little, within that layer, you can kind of taste a little bit of the aniseed, that very slightly licorice-y kind of note. So that's really quite interesting how that kind of pieces in with that, and it gives you a wee bit of just a spiciness the further into the aftertaste that you go. So you're getting a little bit of spiciness from the rye itself, and from, I think, the kind of aniseedy notes in this one. But then above that kind of more brandy soaked bready layer, you've got a bit of a straight up wholemeal brown bready layer, and then you start to get all the kind of brown sugary notes out of this one. So you've got this layer that's like maple syrup, but it's kind of herbally at the same time, and I'm guessing that's the fenugreek that's kind of giving you that. And it's, yeah, I think it's the fenugreek that's giving you that sort of herbally layer of like maple syrup. But then above all of that, you start to get the more straight up brown sugars in this one. I wouldn't go as far as saying it's like treacly and molasses, but you get different degrees of caramel in this one. So above that fenugreeky layer, in the dead centre of your palate, you've got a really concentrated boozy type caramel, and it kind of brightens up and becomes a little bit more like honey the further out you go, and then you get a little bit of like honeycomb and biscuit toward the edge of the palate. So it's very layered, this beer, in how everything kind of comes out. I would say the interesting thing about this one is that it has vanilla obviously added into it, but I don't find the vanilla too overbearing in this beer, to be honest with you. It's not. It's just nice and kind of subtle, but it comes out further forward on that middle third of your palate. In the base with the wood, you get more and more of it the further into the aftertaste that you go. Yeah, it's a really interesting beer, this one, just because of how everything goes together. It's really quite different in a sense. But I think we've now covered the middle third of your palate, which is the most complex part of the beer. So let's go on to the back third of the palate. As I always say, you tend to get similar flavours on the back third of the palate, but they just come out in different intensities. But do remember that trend, that sweeter flavours come out further forward, drier flavours and drier and more bitter flavours come out further back on the palate. So yeah, on the back, in the border region, you get a little bit of bready build up. There's a wee touch of a rye bread in the base, but it's more a wholemeal kind of brown bready character that comes out of this one there. And then yeah, you've got the base of this one, the wood that's there is obviously a little bit drier. Above that you've got the spirit, which feels a little bit more kind of slightly spicy and boozy on that back third of the palate too. Then you get the rye bread crust, which again is more dry and more kind of spicy and things. Then you've got the rye bready layer, which feels a little bit lighter and more airy. Then you've got the more then you've got the kind of brandy soaked bready fruit loaf type layer there, which again feels a little bit lighter, more airy, but still kind of dense and almost more cakey in the back third of the palate, in fairness, I would say. Then above that you get the wholemeal brown bready layer, which is a little bit lighter and more airy. And then you can feel a little bit of the kind of brown sugary qualities just creeping over the top of it. I think you're getting a little bit more of the kind of herbally character of the kind of herbally vegetally character from the fenugreek on top of that back third of your palate, and then above everything else you've got the more yeasty side of the flavour coming out. So yeah, that's really interesting in that sense. But yeah, the way this beer pieces together from that perspective, I think, is really, really quite nice. Yeah, definitely on that back third of the palate you can feel the flavour is taller. Then as you come further forward into the middle third of your palate, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together, and that's really, really nice. So I think we've covered the yeasty, malty and barrel side of the beer. Let's move on to the green component and the fruity side of things. As I said earlier, when you have a rye wine, barley wines do have quite a lot of hops and things in them. Rye wines are similar, but when it's barley aged, a lot of the hoppy character is going to have dropped out. You can feel this one's very, very smooth along the side of the palate, which indicates that has taken place, but you do still get a significant bit of green component out of this beer. In the back corners of the palate there's a little bit of earthiness in there, a little bit of herbal character, and as you push further forward toward the front corners of the palate, when you push further forward toward the front corners of the palate, it's just that little bit more floral. Then round the front curve of the tongue, it's a wee bit lighter and more grassy. So yeah, the way that comes out is quite nice. You do get a little touch of hoppy bitterness out of this beer, the further into the aftertaste that you go, and it's lovely. But yeah, on the front third of your palate then, and the fruity side of things, so the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a little bit of a kind of bready build up in there, wee bit of rye bread in the base, and a little bit of a kind of brown bread and kind of, you know, brandy soaked fruit loaf on the top. But then the base of that front third of your palate, again, you've got the lovely smooth oak, a wee bit more vanilla to it this time, of course. But then you've also got the the wee bit of bready character sitting on top, and further back on that, you really do get the nice, further back on that, you do get the really nice kind of fruity character sitting on top. So you can feel the date syrup in there, that kind of dry, datey kind of quality is just sitting on top of the spirit layer on that front third of your palate, and it is absolutely lovely. So yeah, I have to say that is pretty awesome in this one, but of course you've got other fruits in there as well. So at the back of that front third of your palate, you do get like a very slight plum coming out of this one. So there's a very slight plum in there. There's a little bit of a kind of drier prune underneath, and then you've got the datey characters in there. As you move further forward toward the centre of that front third of your palate, there's a little bit of like an oily, there's a bit sultana first off, like dry white green grapes, and then there's a little bit of an oily pear as you move into the kind of front half of that front third of your palate. And then the way that this goes together, it goes together in that sense, is quite nice. So as you move further forward from that into the front half of the front third of your palate, you do get little elements of red fruity character. There's a little bit of black currant. I wouldn't go as far as saying like blackberry, but there's maybe just a very slight figgy character in there too. But of course the focus of the fruits is the kind of date syrup and things like that. It's that dry datey note. But as I say, sultana, pear, a little bit of like plum and prune in there. Then further forward, you've got a wee bit more of a kind of you have got a little bit more of a kind of nice, I would say, just a little bit of black currant and stuff on the kind of tip of your tongue there. But yeah, I mean, this one really is a really very, very interesting beer, I have to say. The camera is absolutely hating the light that this that the can is giving off just now, but the fruity side of this beer is lovely and dry and just oily. It's absolutely great. So I think on that note we can round off with a wee look at the mouthfeel then. So for me, this beer, unquestionably, it's full-bodied. Yeah, it's mid full-bodied toward top end of full-bodied. The carbonation is very, very smooth. It's a big, slick, oily thing, this one. In terms of IBUs, it's hard to say because the beer does have that little bit of spice to it. It has got a little touch of bitterness, and it's got quite a little bit of dryness too. You know, you've got perceived bitterness versus actual or calculated bitterness, however you want to call it. This beer, for me, has the equivalent of maybe a 40 or 50 IBUs. Like, it's not going to blow the head off you. And the bitterness that you get out of this is kind of counteracted by the sweetness. That the malt base in this one, you've got the wood obviously in there, which gives you a bit of smoothness and dryness. You've got the malty side of it, which gives the beer kind of smoothness, and then you've got the big sweetness on top as well. So it's a big intermix of things that's going on with this beer, which I really do quite like, I have to say. But yeah, in terms of the big kind of the maltiness that you get with this is absolutely lovely. But yeah, you have got a wee bit of bitterness in there, then you've got these lovely dry fruits, and you've got a spiciness that comes out of this beer. This beer gets drier and more spicy the further into the aftertaste that you go. But yeah, this is awesome. This is a very, very good beer, and up there with the best Scottish beers that I've reviewed. It really pushes Boris the Crusher, the barley wine that I had from Dead End Brew Machine a few years ago, and also the Old Parochial. It really pushes them in terms of quality and things like that. It's a very, very good beer actually. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. This has been right up my street, a big malty, brown, sugary bastard of a beer, so absolutely love it. So yeah, this one was the Dream Sequence Sticky Side Up, a 12.8% rye wine, aged for 24 months in Heaven Hill Bourbon Cask from Kentucky in the States, but brewed by Tempest Brewing Company in Galashiels on the Scottish borders in collaboration with the wonderful Dead End Brew Machine, a gypsy brewery based in Glasgow. Awesome beer this, if you get the chance to try it. Do it. Will be a bit more expensive, but you will not regret it. I can absolutely guarantee you that. So yeah, one of the best Scottish beers I've reviewed, that's fair to say. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from both Tempest Brewing Company and Dead End Brew Machine as well. And I will no doubt catch you guys in another review very, very soon. But until then, slàinte, skål, cheers, and see you guys in the next one. Ciao just now.